Wide-ranging decisions affecting virtually every aspect of life are being made by fewer and fewer masterminds in Washington, D.C., in an increasingly centralized federal government, using a growing army of bureaucrats, a fourth branch of government, if you will, to institute and enforce them. More and more of what the federal government does is insulated from elections. If elections are won that advance the left's agenda, then they're celebrated. If they lose the elections are denounced as temporary inconveniences, and then they turn to the unelected federal institutions to advance their agenda. In other words, the trajectory toward utopian statism, concentrated power, centralized government is never really checked or actually reversed. And the reason is, and the sad truth is, that we live largely under a post-constitutional government. This is no longer a federal republic, or a constitutional republic, or a representative republic. The federal, constitutional, and representative character of the national government have been and are being dismantled. We are mutating into something else. In Washington today, we have an ongoing constitutional convention where one branch or another, or the federal bureaucracy, act far outside the limits imposed on them by the Constitution. And rather than the branches checking and balancing each other, they usually reinforce each other. And as lawless precedent is built upon lawless precedent, what remains of the Constitution's firewalls are breached. And my question to you is, where does this end? Well, I'll tell you where it ends, with you. We are not without recourse. But the recourse is not in Washington, D.C. It's not in federal elections. Why the hell would the very people who've done this to us reverse course? They like what they're doing, and they're going to keep doing it unless somebody speaks out and acts against them. And that's you. There's nobody else. Today, the federal government is the nation's largest creditor, debtor, lender, employer, consumer, grantor, property owner, tenant, insurer, health care provider, and pension guarantor. Does that sound like limited government to you? The issue is no longer what matters the federal government is involved in, but what matters it's not involved in. And you state officials have absolutely no say and no power once the federal government claims the power to act, period. In fact, you are mostly irrelevant once the federal government decides to act. And so are we, the people. Like much of the rest of the Constitution, the 10th Amendment is mostly ignored, and federalism is essentially dead. But there is recourse. There's a way to restore the Republic, the Constitution, and the civil society. And only you and your colleagues in the state legislatures have the constitutional and lawful authority to do it. Nobody else, and nobody else will do it. Do you realize that acting together, the state legislatures have more power than the entire federal government? The Convention of the States process is quintessential federalism. It's the purest form of representative government we have in this nation. And it bypasses the federal branches of the national government, and that was exactly the purpose. So I want you to understand that you as individuals, each of you, have a duty under the federal Constitution. You have a duty under the federal Constitution of the United States to this republic. You have a duty to save it. You have a capacity as state representatives and state senators, you alone, not your governors, not congressmen, not senators, not the president, not the courts, but you, have it within yourselves. And it ought to be your number one priority when you leave here, to help restore this republic and give us our Constitution back.